Endnight came back, but this time not with Sons of the Forest, with a trailer that announced Forest 3. And in this video I don't want to explore into the details from this trailer, because YouTubers did it right now. I want to share my opinion with you. This trailer, it's a good news in general for Endnight, or it is terrible news for Sons of the Forest, because I know there is a question running through all of our minds. Will Endnight finish developing Sons of the Forest? Well, I will clarify a few things here. Ever since Forest 3 was revealed, there has been this weird, comfortable feeling in this community. A lot of people are thinking the same thing, but not everyone wants to say it out loud. There is a real chance that Endnight is basically done with Sons of the Forest. Not officially cancelled, not announced as finished, but quietly they may have already moved on. And today I want to talk about that by breaking things down into two possible scenarios, and then figuring out which one actually makes more sense. The first scenario is the one most fans want to believe. Endnight keeps updating Sons of the Forest while also working on Forest 3 at the same time. So in this scenario, Sons of the Forest still gets bug fixes, some major updates, maybe even some small contents here and there, while the Forest 3 is being developed in the background. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But once you really think about it, problems start showing up. Endnight is a very small studio. They don't have multiple big teams working in parallel. Supporting a survival game like Sons of the Forest is not light work. Every update needs AI testing, performance optimization, multiplayer stability checks, and a lot of quality control. Doing all of that while also building a brand new game from scratch is a massive workload for a studio their size. And then there is the update patterns. If you look at early Sons of the Forest updates compared to recent ones, the differences is obvious. Updates are slower, content is smaller, communication is more quiet. That usually doesn't mean active development. It usually means maintenance mode. And there is another important point. Endnight has never really supported two major games at the same time before. Their history shows a very clear patterns. Full focus on one game, then move on to the next. So while this first scenario is technically possible, it honestly doesn't feel very likely. Now let's talk about the second scenario, maybe the one a lot of people don't like. Endnight shifts almost all of its focus to Forest 3, and the scenario fits reality much better. First, the timing. Forest 3 was revealed surprisingly early. Studios usually don't announce a new game unless the previous one has reached a stable, finished state, or the team is mentally ready to move forward. But with Endnight there is a tip that Sons of the Forest is not completely finished, and naturally they have to finish their previous game, and then after finishing Sons of the Forest they can be ready for announcing the next game. Like the original Forest, they did it before. Sons of the Forest is a very complex game, advanced AI, survival systems, deep mechanics, and I think with these features and also that huge map that Sons of the Forest carries on, from Endnight point of view, starting fresh with Forest 3 is actually easier and more exciting than endlessly patching an old system like Sons of the Forest. And actually that can be bad for some reasons. But like always, there is this silence. Endnight hasn't clearly said they are committed to long-term Sons of the Forest development. Like always, they are working in silence. And here is something important. If Endnight had big future expansions planned Sons of the Forest, they probably wouldn't have revealed Forest 3 yet. Announcing a new game splits attention, and studios usually avoid that unless they are ready to move on. What is most likely happening? Probably not full abandonment, but also not full support. Sons of the Forest is most likely entering minimal support. Major creative energy is now on Forest 3. Updates for Sons of the Forest will probably be rare, small, and mostly technical. In other words, Sons of the Forest isn't dead, but it is no longer the future, and that changed how we should look at the game. In scenario 2, we should stop expecting massive contents drop or huge gameplay changes and start appreciating Sons of the Forest as a complete survival experience. Although that is not complete and that have huge map with many potentials for releasing updates. But with high probability, if you keep waiting for the next big update for Sons of the Forest, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. So this was scenario 2, and this is where another important point comes in. Sons of the Forest had and still has a huge amount of untapped potential, not just creatively but commercially. If Endnight's main goal was pure monetization, Sons of the Forest offered clear opportunities. The biggest one is console releases. Releasing Sons of the Forest on PlayStation and Xbox would immediately expose the game to a much larger audience. We have already seen how well survival games perform on consoles, and the Forest itself proved that there is a strong demand there. From a business perspective, that alone could have justified continued development, long-term support, and further optimization. And it doesn't stop there. Console launches often come with definitive editions, major performance improvements, quality of life updates, and sometimes even paid expansions or bundled content. And whether that decision pays off or not depends entirely on what Forest 3 becomes. But if it doesn't, then Sons of the Forest will always feel like the road not taken. A game with massive potential, not just creatively but commercially, that was never fully explored. Do you believe Endnight should have stayed focused on Sons of the Forest longer, or it is time to let it stand on its own and move on to Forest 3? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching this video and farewell.